Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Dawn, watching the stars drift past through the massive viewing windows. Behind him, 50,000 people lived their daily lives, completely unaware that death was racing toward them. Through the darkness of space, these weren't soldiers or explorers. They were families, teachers, doctors, engineers, and children who had volunteered to build humanity's first permanent settlement beyond the solar system. The ship hummed with life. In the medical bay, Park Ji-soo carefully tended to an elderly colonist who had fallen ill during the long journey. Her gentle hands and warm smile had earned her the nickname the ship's angel among the passengers. She often spoke about the hospital she planned to build on their new world, where she could help both humans and whatever alien life they might encounter peacefully. 3 decks below, 8-year-old Kim Tae-yang laughed as he chased his friends through the recreation center. The boy had spent most of his short life aboard the New Dawn, and to him, this massive vessel was home. He drew pictures of the new planet they were heading to, always including his parents and a little house with a garden where his mother could grow earth flowers under an alien sun. Engineer Choi Seung-hwan worked quietly in the engine room, making final adjustments to the ship's systems. In just 2 weeks they would reach Kepler 442b, and his job would shift from maintaining a starship to helping build a new civilization. He carried photos of his wife and daughter back on Earth, planning to send for them once the colony was established. None of them knew they were being watched. The hegemony had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They were an alliance of reptilian species who believed that strength was the only currency that mattered in the universe. To them, other species existed for one purpose: to serve or die. They had conquered 47 different civilizations, and each victory had been swift and brutal. Admiral Vextar commanded the hegemony patrol fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with plasma cannons and boarding pods. When his sensors detected the human colony ship, he felt nothing but mild curiosity. These humans were unknown to him, but that didn't matter. The pattern was always the same: scan the vessel, determine its military capability, then either destroy it or capture the survivors for slave labor. His tactical officer reported that the human ship carried no weapons, no shields, and no military escort. Vextar's scaled lips curled into what might have been a smile. Another easy conquest to add to his record. The attack came without warning, without communication, without mercy. Minho was reviewing navigation charts when the bridge erupted in sparks and flames. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship. As hegemony plasma bolts tore through the hull, he grabbed the intercom trying to coordinate evacuations, but it was already too late. The enemy had targeted the ship's critical systems first, ensuring that the New Dawn couldn't escape or fight back. Boarding pods crashed through the outer hull like metallic meteors. Hegemony soldiers poured into the corridors, their energy weapons, cutting down anyone they encountered. They moved with practiced efficiency, having done this countless times before on countless other ships filled with other species who had also believed they were safe among the stars. Jisoo tried to evacuate. Her patience when the soldiers reached the medical bay. She stood in front of an injured child, her arms spread wide, pleading with the reptilian warriors in broken universal translation. The soldiers looked at her for a moment, perhaps puzzled by her attempt to protect someone who wasn't even her own offspring. Then they fired, and Jisoo fell beside the medical bed she had been defending. Taeyang and the other children huddled in a storage closet in the recreation center, their small hands pressed over their mouths to muffle their terrified breathing. They could hear the soldiers searching room by room, their heavy footsteps getting closer. When the door was finally torn open, bright light flooded in, and the children's screams echoed through the corridors before being silenced forever. Seung-hwan knew the ship was doomed, but he had one last duty to perform. Racing through the chaos, he reached the ship's data core and began emergency upload procedures. The black box contained everything: the location of Earth, records of human civilization, and most importantly, sensor data showing exactly who had attacked them and why. As hegemony soldiers broke into the engine room, Seung-hwan launched the escape pod containing the data recorder. The small vessel shot away from the dying New Dawn, just as the colony ship's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the darkness like a new star being born and dying in the same instant. 6 months later, the escape pod drifted into Earth's solar system, its automated beacon broadcasting a simple message. Survivors aboard, priority data, the new dawn has fallen. Only 12 people had made it to the escape pods in time. 12 souls out of 50,000. When Earth's rescue ships opened the pod, they found the survivors clutching the data recorder like a sacred relic. The footage it contained would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place. In the universe, the galaxy had just made a terrible mistake. Defense Minister Yoon Hana had seen war before. She had witnessed bombings, terrorist attacks, and natural disasters that claimed thousands of lives. But nothing had prepared her for what she watched in the secure briefing room beneath the Global Defense Headquarters. The footage from the new dawn played on the massive screen, and with each passing second, she felt something fundamental change inside her chest. The camera shook as engineer Choi Seung-hwan had recorded the final moments. There was little Taeyang hiding behind an overturned table, his young voice calling for his mother. The hegemony soldier appeared in frame, raised his weapon without hesitation, and fired. The boy's voice cut off instantly. The recording continued for 3 more minutes, showing similar scenes throughout the ship. Families torn apart, medical staff executed while trying to save patients, children hunted down like animals. When the footage ended, the council chamber fell into absolute silence. 12 world leaders sat around the table, their faces pale and drawn. Some wept openly. Others stared at their hands, unable to process what they had witnessed. But Yoon Hana felt something else entirely. Deep in her stomach, a cold fire had begun to burn. She stood slowly, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed the systematic murder of 50,000 human beings. These weren't soldiers. They weren't armed. They were families seeking a new life among the stars. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The species responsible for this will learn what happens when you attack the wrong people. Within hours, the footage had been declassified and broadcast across every network on Earth. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. In Seoul, millions of people poured into the streets, their angry voices demanding justice. In Lagos, workers abandoned their posts to volunteer for military service. In São Paulo, factory owners pledged their entire production capacity to the war effort. Dr. Kim Ji-ho had spent his entire career developing defensive technologies. His laboratory in the mountains of Switzerland had focused on protecting Earth from asteroids and solar flares. But as he watched the massacre footage for the 5th time, his perspective shifted completely. Within 24 hours, he had submitted a proposal to convert every defensive system into an offensive weapon. His team worked without sleep for weeks. The particle beam arrays designed to deflect space debris were reconfigured to slice through starship hulls. The gravitational field generators, meant to redirect comets, became weapons capable of crushing enemy vessels like empty cans. But Ji-ho's masterpiece was something entirely new: adaptive artificial intelligence systems that could learn enemy tactics in real time and develop countermeasures instantly. Admiral Park Dong-woo had commanded Earth's small exploration fleet for 15 years. His ships were designed for peaceful contact with alien civilizations, equipped with translation computers and diplomatic protocols. Now he stood in the massive orbital shipyards above Earth, watching as construction crews worked around the clock to transform his explorer vessels into instruments of war. The changes were dramatic. Where once there had been science laboratories, now there were missile pods. The communication arrays that had been meant to send messages of peace across the galaxy were replaced with targeting systems designed for maximum destruction. Every single ship in Earth's fleet was being rebuilt from the ground up. But the existing fleet wasn't enough. Humanity needed more ships, more weapons, more of everything if they were going to make the hegemony pay for what they had done. That's where people like Song-mina came in. Song-mina had worked at the Busan Heavy Industries shipyard for 12 years, building commercial freighters and passenger liners. She was a mother of 2, a woman who had never imagined herself as part of a war effort. But when she saw the footage of Taeyang's murder, something changed inside her. She volunteered for the emergency production program that same day. The work was brutal. 18-hour shifts became the norm as humanity raced to build the largest war fleet in its history. Song Mina learned to install weapons systems, armor plating, and shield generators. Her hands, once soft from civilian work, became calloused and scarred from handling military-grade components. She worked through exhaustion, through pain, through the nightmares that came from watching the massacre footage over and over again. Around the world, millions of others made similar sacrifices. Farmers worked extra shifts to feed the factory. Teachers volunteered to care for workers' children. Retired engineers came out of retirement to share their expertise. Humanity had become a single organism focused on one goal: vengeance. Physicist Lee Soo-jin had always been fascinated by artificial intelligence, but her research had been limited by ethical considerations and funding constraints. Now, with unlimited resources and government backing, she pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Her AI systems weren't just smart. They were creative, adaptive, and utterly ruthless in their pursuit of victory. The breakthrough came 18 months after the massacre. Soo-jin's AI could watch an enemy ship's movement patterns and predict its next action with 97% accuracy. More importantly, it could devise new attack strategies faster than any organic mind could comprehend. The artificial intelligence didn't just follow human commands, it anticipated them, improved upon them, and executed them with mechanical precision. As Earth's war machine grew stronger, the message being broadcast to the stars was simple and clear. Humanity had been peaceful because they had chosen to be peaceful. They had been explorers because they had wanted to explore. They had sent families to the stars because they had believed the universe was safe for families. The hegemony had proven them wrong, and now humanity would prove something in return. They would show the galaxy what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness, when you confused peace-loving with defenseless. The 12 survivors of the New Dawn watched from Earth as shipyard after shipyard launched new warships into space. They had delivered their message, and now they would witness humanity's response. No hegemony soldier would see another dawn. Admiral Park Dong-woo stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the starfield shift as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of hegemony territory. 2 years of preparation had led to this moment. Behind him, 11 other warships materialized from the void, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor, plating, and bristling with weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. The border world. Zerion Prime hung before them like a blue-green jewel, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. This wasn't just any hegemony outpost. Intelligence reports indicated that Zerion Prime served as a major military staging area, home to over 60,000 hegemony soldiers and their families. More importantly, it was where the fleet that had destroyed the New Dawn had been based. Dongwoo's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the command chair, not from fear, but from barely contained rage. For 2 years he had dreamed of this moment. Every night he saw the faces of the 50,000 colonists who had died. Every morning he woke with their names burning in his memory. On the surface of Zerion Prime, Commander Corthers was enjoying his morning meal when the alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the military complex. His scaled fingers paused over his food as junior officers rushed to their stations. Through the large windows of his command center, he could see his subordinates scrambling to activate the planet's defenses. Corthers had been a military commander for 30 years. He had overseen the conquest of 17 different species, each campaign ending in total victory for the hegemony. When his sensors detected 12 small ships approaching his heavily fortified world, he felt nothing but mild amusement. These unknown vessels were barely larger than hegemony fighters, and they moved with the cautious hesitation he had seen in so many other species before they were crushed. His tactical officer approached with the sensor readings. "Commander, the vessels appear to be of unknown design. Their energy signatures don't match any species in our database." Corthers studied the data with growing confidence. 12 tiny ships against his entire planetary defense fleet. The outcome was inevitable. Dispatch the 3rd Patrol Squadron. 60 ships should be more than sufficient to deal with this minor inconvenience. Within minutes, the hegemony fleet launched from Zerion Prime's orbital stations. Massive dreadnoughts led the formation, their plasma cannons charging with deadly energy. Behind them came cruisers and destroyers, while fighter squadrons spread out in attack formations that had proven successful against dozens of other species. Captain Jung Hoseok watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. His ship, the Retribution, was one of the smaller vessels in the human formation, but it carried something the hegemony had never encountered before: Dr. Kim Ji-ho's adaptive AI weapons systems. As the alien ships drew closer, his artificial intelligence began analyzing their movement patterns, weapon configurations, and tactical formations. "All ships, this is Admiral Dongwu," the communication channel crackled. "Remember why we're here. Remember the new dawn. Remember the children." The hegemony fleet closed to what they considered optimal firing range. Korthas gave the order to open fire, expecting to see the tiny human ships vaporized instantly. Plasma bolts streaked across space, but something impossible happened. The human vessels seemed to dance between the incoming fire, their movements too precise to be natural. Commander Onari piloted her fighter squadron with deadly grace. Her ships moved like a school of fish, each vessel responding to the other's movements in perfect coordination. But these weren't random, evasive maneuvers. The AI systems were learning from every shot the hegemony fired, calculating optimal response patterns and sharing that information instantly across the entire human fleet. The first hegemony ship died without understanding what had killed it. The Retribution fired a single concentrated beam that passed straight through the alien vessels' shields as if they weren't there. The weapon had analyzed the shield frequency and adjusted its output to match the exact wavelength needed to penetrate their defenses. Panic began to spread through the hegemony formation as more ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Their weapons, which had destroyed countless other species, seemed completely ineffective against these small human vessels. Worse, every shot they fired was being used against them as the human AI learned to predict and counter their tactics. Captain Jung Hoseok's ship tore through the enemy formation like a blade through cloth. The Retribution targeted the largest hegemony dreadnought, its adaptive weapon systems, identifying weak points in the alien vessel's armor. Within seconds, the massive ship's reactor went critical, taking 3 smaller vessels with it in the key explosion. Onari's fighters swarmed the remaining hegemony ships like angry hornets. Each fighter was small enough to avoid the aliens' main weapons, but fast enough to strike at vulnerable points. Her pilots had trained for this moment, practicing attack runs against simulated hegemony vessels until their movements became instinctive. On Zerion Prime, Korthas watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. These humans fought with a precision and fury that defied everything he understood about warfare. More terrifying was their technology, which seemed to improve with every passing second. He tried to contact his ships, ordering them to retreat, but it was already too late. The human vessels had learned to jam hegemony communications while maintaining perfect coordination among themselves. His 60 ships were being picked apart one by one, their debris creating a growing cloud of wreckage around Zerion Prime. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, not a single hegemony vessel remained intact. The space around, the border world, was filled with the burning remains of what had once been a proud fleet. Admiral Dongwu opened a communication channel to Zerion Prime, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "This is Admiral Park Dongwu of the Human Defense Fleet. This attack is in response to the unprovoked massacre of 50,000 civilians aboard the colony ship New Dawn. This is for little Kim Taeyang and all the other children you murdered." Paused, letting his words sink in across the alien world below. "We know you recorded this battle. We know you'll send word to your empire. Tell them this: we are humanity, and we're just getting started. Every world that participated in the New Dawn massacre will face the same fate." The transmission ended, leaving Zerion Prime in stunned silence. On the planet's surface, Korthas stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. 60 ships destroyed. In 17 minutes by an enemy he had dismissed as insignificant. As the human fleet departed, heading deeper into hegemony space, they left behind no survivors to rescue, no disabled ships to study their technology. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they were bringing war the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. The news of Xerion Prime's destruction spread through hegemony space like wildfire, but the aliens had no time to process their shock. Within 72 hours of the first battle, 12 different star systems came under simultaneous attack. The humans weren't just striking back, they were launching a coordinated campaign that demonstrated military planning on a scale the hegemony had never imagined possible. Captain Kang Deho commanded the Northern Assault Fleet, targeting the industrial worlds that supplied the hegemony's war machine. His flagship, the UES Reckoning, led 15 vessels toward the manufacturing planet of Corvain Beta. Unlike the cautious approach at Xerion Prime, Deho's fleet moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was already defeated. The Aedan, hegemony defenders waited in traditional formation, their heavy cruisers arranged in defensive lines around the planet. They had studied the footage from Xerion Prime and believed they understood the human advantage. The aliens had concluded that superior technology was the key, so they prepared to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. They were completely wrong. Deho's ships didn't engage the defensive fleet directly. Instead, they demonstrated humanity's newest breakthrough, dimensional warfare. The human vessels simply vanished from normal space, reappearing inside the hegemony formation. But this wasn't teleportation. The ships had shifted into a parallel dimension where alien weapons couldn't touch them, while their own weapons could still strike targets in normal space. The hegemony ships found themselves firing at empty space, while human vessels materialized around them like ghosts, delivering devastating attacks before disappearing again. Within minutes, the entire defensive fleet was crippled, their crews panicking as they faced an enemy that could strike from nowhere. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of hegemony space, Captain Im Yuna was demonstrating an entirely different form of warfare. Her fleet approached the fortress world of Drakmor, home to the hegemony's military academy where young aliens learned the art of conquest. Yuna had volunteered for this particular mission because intelligence reports indicated that many of the soldiers who had boarded the New Dawn had been trained on this world. Instead of attacking the planet directly, Yuna's ships targeted the system's asteroid belt. Using gravitational manipulation technology, they began herding massive space rocks toward Drakmor. But these weren't random impacts. The humans had calculated precise trajectories that would devastate military installations, while leaving civilian areas largely untouched. The hegemony fleet tried to intercept the incoming asteroids, but discovered that each rock had been fitted with defensive systems that made them nearly impossible to destroy. Worse, some of the asteroids split apart as they approached the planet, revealing human strike teams in powered armor who had ridden the rocks down through the atmosphere. Commander Shin Ryujin led one of these assault teams, and her soldiers carried technology that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Their armor allowed them to walk through solid matter, phasing in and out of reality at will. Hegemony defenders found themselves facing enemies who could step through walls, appear behind cover, and strike from impossible angles. Ryujin's team materialized inside the military academy's command center, their weapons ready. The alien officers reached for their sidearms, but the humans were faster. Within seconds, the command staff was neutralized, and Ryujin was downloading their tactical databases. The information would help humanity locate every hegemony military installation in this sector, but the most spectacular display of human capability came from Captain Bei Somin's fleet at the Veltar system. This was where the hegemony kept their primary shipyards, massive orbital constructions that had been building warships for over 1,000 years. Somin had been given permission to use humanity's most devastating weapon, the moon launcher. Her ships positioned themselves near Veltar's largest moon, a barren rock roughly the size of Earth's Luna. Using a combination of gravitational manipulation and massive thruster arrays, they began accelerating the entire moon toward the shipyards. The hegemony defenders watched in horror as a celestial body weighing billions of tons slowly picked up speed, becoming an unstoppable kinetic weapon. The aliens tried everything to stop it. They fired their most powerful weapons at the approaching moon. But the human ships had reinforced it with energy shields that absorbed the impacts. They attempted to change its trajectory using their own gravitational devices, but Samin's fleet countered every move with superior technology. When the moon struck the shipyards, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. 1,000 years of hegemony naval construction was wiped out in a single devastating impact that left nothing but expanding clouds of debris. As news of these simultaneous victories reached the hegemony capital, panic began to spread through their government. Emperor Zaltek, who had ruled the galaxy's most powerful empire for 50 years, found himself facing something unprecedented, an enemy that was systematically dismantling his military machine with tactics he couldn't understand or counter. Emperor's client species, dozens of races that had served the hegemony out of fear, began to sense weakness. On 12 different worlds, subject populations rose in rebellion, confident that their alien overlords were no longer invincible. The hegemony's 1,000-year reign was crumbling as fast as their fleets. In desperation, Zalthek authorized his diplomatic corps to contact the humans and offer surrender terms. The message was broadcast on emergency frequencies, pleading for negotiations and offering massive reparations for the New Dawn incident. The Emperor proposed territorial concessions, tribute payments, and even the execution of the officers responsible. For the massacre, the response was absolute silence. Admiral Vextar, the same commander who had ordered the destruction of the New Dawn, now found himself defending the hegemony capital world. His remaining fleets had been recalled from across the Empire, creating a massive defensive formation around the throne world. Nearly 1 million ships surrounded the planet, the largest concentration of military force in galactic history. But Vextar had studied the human attacks, and what he saw terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced. These humans didn't fight for territory or resources. They didn't seek to conquer or enslave. They fought with the focused fury of a species that had been wronged beyond forgiveness. Every human attack had been precisely calculated to cause maximum damage to military targets while minimizing civilian casualties. They could have glassed entire planets, but instead they surgically removed military installations and left populations intact. This wasn't random violence, it was justice delivered with mechanical precision. As Vextar prepared for the final battle, he realized that the hegemony had made the gravest error in its 1,000-year history. They had attacked a species that possessed not only superior technology, but something far more dangerous: the absolute moral certainty that came from being the victim of unprovoked aggression. The humans weren't coming to conquer the galaxy. They were coming to ensure that no other species would ever suffer the fate of the New Dawn. And they wouldn't stop until every ship, every weapon, and every soldier responsible for that massacre had been reduced to atoms, drifting in the cold void of space. The hunt was nearly over, but the final reckoning was yet to come. Admiral Yoon Hana stood in the command center of the UES Final Justice, her eyes fixed on the massive viewing screen that showed the hegemony capital world growing, larger with each passing hour. Behind her stretched the largest human fleet ever assembled, 300 warships, carrying the most devastating weapons humanity had ever created. Each vessel bore the names of those lost aboard the New Dawn, turning the fleet into a floating memorial dedicated to 50,000 murdered souls. Among those names was Kim Taeyang, Yoon Hana's 8-year-old nephew. She had watched the boy grow from a curious toddler into a bright child who dreamed of becoming an explorer like his father. When the New Dawn had launched, Taeyang had sent her a drawing of the new planet, complete with stick figures of his family and the words, "Come visit us, Aunt Hana," written in crayon across the bottom. Now that drawing was framed on her desk, a constant reminder of why this final battle had to happen. The hegemony capital world of Thraknor dominated the system, a massive planet surrounded by defensive installations that had protected the Empire's heart for over a millennium. Nearly 1 million alien warships formed concentric spheres around the world, their hulls bristling with every weapon the hegemony had ever developed. It was the largest military formation in galactic history assembled from the scattered remnants of an empire that had once ruled half the known galaxy. Admiral Vexitar commanded the defense from his flagship, the same vessel from which he had ordered the New Dawn's destruction 2 years earlier. He had studied every human attack, analyzed every tactical innovation, and prepared countermeasures for every weapon system Earth had deployed. His scientists had worked around the clock to develop new shields, new armor, new ways to detect phase-shifted ships and gravitational manipulation. But as Vexitar watched the human fleet approach, he felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. These humans had demonstrated capabilities that bordered on the impossible. They had turned moons into weapons, walked through solid matter, and fought with coordination that suggested their ships shared a single mind. Worse, they had done all of this while showing remarkable restraint toward civilian populations. That restraint was what truly terrified him. An enemy seeking conquest or resources could be negotiated with, bribed, or appeased. But these humans fought with the focused determination of a species seeking justice, and justice was not something that could be bargained away. On the surface of Thraknor, panic had consumed the civilian population. The hegemony government had collapsed as news of military defeat after military defeat reached the capital. Emperor Zalthek had barricaded himself in his palace, surrounded by his remaining loyal guards, while riots erupted in the streets outside. But in the youth districts of the great city, something unexpected was happening. Young hegemony citizens, many barely older than Taiyang had been, gathered in secret meetings to discuss what their species had become. These were individuals who had grown up hearing stories of glorious conquests and righteous expansion, only to discover that their empire had been built on the systematic murder of innocent families. Lee Kirith, a 19-year-old student at the capital's university, stood before a crowd of her peers in an abandoned warehouse. Her scales were pale with emotion as she held up a tablet displaying footage from the New Dawn massacre. "This is what our military has done in our name," she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Children murdered for the crime of seeking a new home. Families destroyed for the sin of being different from us. The young hegemony citizens had access to information their government had tried to suppress. They had seen the human response to their empire's aggression, and they understood that humanity possessed the power to destroy their entire world. More importantly, they had seen how the humans fought, with precision strikes against military targets while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. These young aliens realized that humanity was offering them something their own government never had: the chance to choose their own future. As Admiral Yoon Hana's fleet moved into attack position, her weapons officers reported ready status on the planet killer devices. These were weapons that could literally crack a world in half, reducing billions of years of geological development to rubble floating in space. The technology had been developed specifically for this moment, designed to ensure that the hegemony capital would serve as a warning to any other species considering aggression against humanity. Yoon Hana's finger hovered over the firing authorization key. 2 years of rage, grief, and determination had led to this moment. She thought about Taiyang's last moments, about his mother Park Jisoo dying while trying to protect her patients, about all the families who would never see their children grow up. Then the communication console erupted with incoming signals. The first transmission came from the surface of Thraknor itself. Young hegemony civilians had seized control of the planetary communication grid and were broadcasting surrender terms. But these weren't the desperate pleas of a defeated government. They were the organized demands of a generation that refused to accept responsibility for their elders' crimes. "Human fleet, this is the Youth Council of Thraknor," came the translated voice of Kirith. "We have overthrown our military government and taken control of the capital. We offer unconditional surrender and request immediate negotiations. We will hand over every individual responsible for the New Dawn massacre and submit to human justice." More signals followed. Across the hegemony capital, young aliens were rising up against their own military forces. Ancient generals who had ordered the conquest of dozens of species found themselves arrested by their own grandchildren. The revolution was spreading through the city like wildfire, driven by individuals who had decided that their species' future was more important than their empire's past. Admiral Vexitar watched in disbelief as his own officers began laying down their weapons. The fleet that had been assembled to defend the capital was dissolving as crews refused to fight for a government that no longer existed. Even his own bridge crew was looking at him with expressions that bordered on disgust. Yoon. Hana stared at the incoming communications, her hand still hovering over the weapon controls. She had the power to end this war with a single command. Every strategic analysis indicated that destroying the hegemony capital would send a message that would prevent future aggression for generations. It would be justice for Taeyang and all the other victims. But as she watched the feeds from the planet's surface, showing young hegemony citizens helping to arrest war criminals and establish humanitarian aid centers, she realized that humanity faced a choice that would define their place in the galaxy forever. The humans could become the new tyrants, ruling through fear and demonstrating that superior firepower was the only law that mattered. Or they could prove that Earth's children possessed something even more powerful than planet-killing weapons, the wisdom to know when to stay their hand. Yoon-Hana lifted her finger from the firing control and opened a communication channel to the surface. Youth Council of Thraknor, this is Admiral Yoon-Hana of the Human Defense Fleet. We accept your surrender and will work with your provisional government to establish justice for the victims of the New Dawn. She paused, thinking of her nephew's drawing still sitting on her desk. The galaxy will learn today that humanity's greatest strength has never been our weapons. It has always been our ability to choose mercy when vengeance would be easier. The war crimes trials would be held on Earth, ensuring that justice was served for every murdered colonist. The hegemony would be rebuilt under human oversight, transformed from an empire of conquest into a federation of cooperation. And across the galaxy, other species would learn that Earth's children fought not to dominate, but to protect the innocent. In choosing justice over vengeance, humanity had won something far more valuable than military victory. They had won the respect of the galaxy and the right to lead it toward a better future.